Hey guys, it's Olivia here from Olivia's Catastrophe, and today I'm here to give you my November wrap-up. In the month of November, I hit a major slump. I've also started my travelling adventures for a month and a half, so my reading hasn't been quite up to par. However, I still did read 12 books, so let's get right down onto the books. So, for starters, I would like to talk about Cool Down the Hawk by Maggie Stiefvater, which is a book I've been anticipating all year. I've had a buying ban, so I wasn't sure if I was going to get to read it, but I borrowed it from a library and I devoured it very quickly. I had a lot of fun discussing this one with Jade from Jaded Reader. Even though we didn't quite buddy read it, it was still nice to go over my thoughts with someone. So this one is the spin-off series to The Raven Cycle, and no, it is not a sequel series. It follows dreamers, it follows people who want to harm dreamers, and it does follow the Lynch brothers, but don't go expecting it to be a sequel to The Raven King, because it is not that. I can't really tell you much more about it other than it's about those three things: dreamers, people who want to harm dreamers, and the Lynch brothers. But I do have to say that it was really, really good. I absolutely loved getting to see the Lynches, especially more of Declan Lynch, who was one of my low-key favourites from the previous series, but as the series wasn't about him, I didn't get to discover him much. I didn't expect to come out of this book with a new ship, and yet I did. I loved all the scenes with Adam in them. Admittedly, I wanted more Adam, but I did enjoy what Adam and Ronan we got to see. I do think that this one wasn't as good as The Raven Cycle, and that's for two reasons. The first one is that there were more characters that I didn't care about in this one. For example, Hennessy wasn't a character that vibed with me, and I didn't really care about Farouk Lane. However, there were some new characters that I really did love, and I felt like the plot took a lot longer to come together and for me to see where it goes, and that's because Maggie Stiefvater is basically the queen of the overarching plot, where the whole series has one huge plot that comes together very well, rather than each book individually having a series. More so you follow the characters and kind of see where the magic takes you. So in this one I found it a bit harder to see the plot come together, and I got a little bit impatient, so that's why I knocked down a star. But all in all, I really did love this one and I highly recommend it. Can't wait to see where the series goes. I also read The Hounds of the Baskervilles by Arthur Conan Doyle, and I buddy read this one with Opalescent, and I'll leave a link to her channel down below. I really enjoyed buddy reading with her. I listened to this one on audiobook, and I listened to Stephen Fry read it. He is a brilliant narrator, definitely recommend the audiobook. So in The Hounds of the Baskervilles, it's a Sherlock and Watson story where these hounds have been said to haunt this area and kill these people who live there. There's a murder mystery, and it was really good. Other Sherlock Holmes books I have read I haven't enjoyed as much. I felt like they were either racist or problematic, or didn't show the dynamic that I was hoping to see. However, in this one you got to really see the Holmes and Watson dynamic come through, and I love seeing their friendship, and they had some funny moments and moments where you could see they cared about each other. The mystery was good, it was unpredictable, and yeah, it was a very good Holmes and Watson story. I wish the other stories are going to be like this rather than the ones I've previously read. I read Serpent and Dove by Shelby Malherin, and this is a very popular book. It's a witchy read, and we are in this world where there are Cheshires and witches, and they absolutely hate each other. There are two groups that do not match, and for whatever reason this witch gets in a spot of trouble, and to save herself she needs to marry this witch hunter, and he also needs this marriage because it looks like he's done something very unsavory to her, and to protect his name they need to get married. That is the main plot of this one. There's also a side plot where there's a reason why this witch needs protection from other witches, and that gets going in the story. But what I have to say about this is, though it's very popular, I thought it was just okay. I can see why people love it, I can see why people don't love it. It is supposed to be historical fiction fantasy, and I don't think the fantasy elements are strong enough to call it a fantasy. The magic could have been better explained, and it just didn't feel magical enough. And yet I still wouldn't call it a historical fiction, because to be honest, the setting was not set up whatsoever. I actually didn't notice the book was set in France until the end, despite them all having very French names. And then yeah, there was no like historical element set in it. There was a lot of discussion about femininity, gender norms, but like, I don't know, I feel like it wasn't anything new to this discussion. So we did get a lot of that in there. We did get an enemies to lovers trope, which at some point I started to ship their romance, and I was getting behind that. I did like Reed as a character. I feel like he was someone who was problematic, who had to grow to be come open-minded, and I liked going on that journey along with him. But I do think that this book wasn't really bringing anything majorly new to the scene. The writing was just okay. The representation, like, don't go into this with the representation. The representation is not there whatsoever. And yeah, it was just alright, guys. Then I read Saga Volume 2 by Brian Vaughan and Fiona Staples. This is a continuation from the graphic novel series I started last month, and I really did enjoy the second volume a lot as well. I am going to just tell you what the first one is about. It's about these two aliens who fall in love, but they're from different sides of this war effort, and they decide that they're going to have their romance despite it being forbidden, and they have this child. The child is narrating the series, and yeah, it's about both sides of their wars, hunting them because they shouldn't be together. They're defying the war effort and betraying them, and there's all these different people hunting them. This one, I really liked it. It was a great continuation because we got to see the extended family come into the picture a little bit more, and that again brought more questions of kind of an interracial style relationship happening. What are the parents going to think? Are they going to be able to get over their prejudices so that they can start to appreciate the family that they have? There are also some side characters who have got their own things going on. We get introduced to this new character who's out there for revenge, and tell you what, she's my new favourite. Move over the will. I don't care about you. I need me Gwendolyn, this big, black, strong-looking woman. I need her in my life. And then, yeah, there's just a lot of side plots going on that are very, very interesting. The world building continues to build up. I do have to admit that I do not care in the slightest about the robot storyline. But other than that, nothing I don't like in this series. It's also got a great sense of humour. I was really appreciating that. Then I read A Dream So Dark by L.L. McKinney. This is the sequel to A Blade So Black by L.L. McKinney, and I would love to tell you what happened in the first book, but I totally forgot. All I know is that I did not like the first book so much. So this is an Alice in Wonderland retelling with our main character, who is a black Alice, and she kind of lives in the real world, but she can go into Wonderland and she goes there to fight these nightmares. However, there are some problems going on in Wonderland. There is this queen who is causing trouble, and I can't remember what happens in the first book other than there's trouble happening and they have to go on a quest to find these two objects, the eye and the heart, which can be helpful to them in some way or form. Sorry if that was unclear. I'll leave a Goodreads link down below. I did read the sequel and I don't want to tell you about it because there might be spoilers, and as I can't remember what I shouldn't be spoiling, I could accidentally do so, but I really did like the sequel a lot more than the first book. I won't say it's the best book out there. Sometimes when I was reading, it dragged a little bit, and there were some elements that were really good. I felt the world building was done exceptionally well here and way better than in the first book. And I also liked how this mother-daughter relationship was coming in. I feel like in fantasy, when it's young adult, often the parents tend to be out of the picture or shoved out of the picture quickly so that you can have a young adult who's kind of independent and doing her own thing. But that is not the case in this one. Alice has her mother, and although her mother doesn't know about the Wonderland stuff, she does need to provide some excuses and work on this relationship with her mother so that she can continue fighting the bad guys and doing what she needs to get done. So I really did like those aspects. What I didn't like was the representation that they were kind of shoehorning in. I feel like the black representation could just be expanded upon and more included. And then there's some LGBT plus rep, and I feel like they were hinting at it with some characters, but it just kind of didn't go anywhere. But then with one character, it's really obvious that it's LGBT plus rep, and I was just like, okay, I don't feel like it's the best rep, I don't feel like it's the worst rep, it's just kind of there in the book. And the plot itself was decent. I just feel like it was a decent read. Then I've actually got some physical books this time. So next up I read The Island by M.A. Bennett, and this is one that I was very, very anticipating and very, very much let me down. It's a Lord of the Flies retelling. So in this one, there's this school called Osney, and it's a school that's based on sports, and we follow Link, and he is a nerd. He is not doing well in the social status of school. He's actually very, very bullied just because of who he is, and he decides he's going to quit school, and his parents say, yes, you're allowed to, you just have to go on this one last trip, which is a summer trip to an island. And he goes with his classmates, and the plane crashes and they are stranded on the island, and all of a sudden it might not be the sportiest people who end out on top, but instead it might be the nerds who are on the rise. No, 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 no. Okay, so I started this book in July and then I put it down because I couldn't stand it, and then I decided, you know what, I read about 3/4 of the book, I'm gonna push through and finish it this month, which I did, so congrats to me, I did it. I thought I was going to relate to Link more. I thought I was going to like Link more because he's the victim in this, but just because you're a victim, it does not give you free reign to do all of the horrible things that he does in this book, and I feel like he goes above and beyond, and I don't feel like he's justified in any of the choices that he makes. Like, yes, he was bullied severely, and I felt for him during those moments, but I don't think, like, he took it way, way, way too far, seriously too far. I also feel like because I couldn't even like Link, there were no likable characters in this book. Didn't really like any of them. Felt like they were all awful people and I felt no sympathy for them. I did not care about what was happening on the island. I felt no like thrill. Some things were predictable. I admit I was surprised in some places, but yeah, big no from me. I also don't think we can pass this off as good parenting, as it tried to wrap up some certain things that parents did and make it look like good parenting. No, honey, no, that's not good parenting. I'm not a parent, and I can tell you that's not good parenting. And also, I really want the trope to just die where people are severely homophobic because they are themselves gay or part of the or identify as any of the LGBT plus community. Like, no, we need to stop saying and promoting that it's okay to be homophobic if you're trying to stay in the closet. Like, no, that's not how it works, and it's just awful to read about, and I don't enjoy it. So yeah, those are a couple of the reasons why I didn't like the island, but I could go on. We're going to contrast that with Odells Fool by Norman Bacall, and this was a new favourite for me, a 5-star read. This is a retelling of Othello, and it's a mystery thriller book. It's set in a law firm, so we're following these lawyers, and Odell is freshly married to his wife Dee. He is working this really big case with his assistant Jackson, who he undoubtedly trusts, but everything goes awry when a murder happens and nobody knows who has done it. This book, this is the way you do a retelling. It's got enough of the elements of the original Shakespeare material for me to be able to recognise that it's Othello, for me to be able to see how some items are substituting for other items, to see how some plot lines are playing out. But then something completely different happens, which is so far from the material but still in line with the themes of the play and the themes of the material, that this became unpredictable, that I didn't know where it was going, but I could see how it was reflecting the themes of the source material. That to me is the perfect way to do a retelling. I will say that this thriller is not for everyone. It gets down deep into the technicalities and looking at all of the like little details when it comes to solving the crime, when the police are solving the crime, or when it comes to just different things. But for me, like describing the law system and the law jobs, but for me that's kind of what I love, because I don't know anything about law, and reading all the details helps me really feel informed, and running over the source material makes me feel like I'm a detective and a policeman along with the characters. So if you don't like a lot of technicalities when you're reading thrillers and science fiction and things like that, you might not love this one like I did, but it was almost as if it was written for me. It is a plot-driven book, so it's really focused on the plot, and while I think the characters are very complex and their motives are always shown in everything, if you're not drawn to the characters, you are drawn to the plot. There are some trigger warnings for this one, there are some trigger warnings for the island, but as usual I have all my trigger warnings in the box down below. As I said at the beginning of this video, I slumped hard for 2 weeks when I was in November, and during those 2 weeks the only thing I could bring myself to read was poetry. So let's talk about the poetry collections I read. To start with, I read Kindred by Keely Saunders, and it shows up best over here, I think. This is by an Indigenous Australian author. I'm trying to read more Australian poets, and I wanted to try something Indigenous because why not? And I think if you like Rupi Kaur's poetry, you're going to like this one, because the poems are straightforward and simple, but they're not short. So they're kind of like a step up from Rupi Kaur's poetry, or just a step away from Rupi Kaur's poetry, because we don't want to say like Rupi Kaur's poetry is bad even though I don't enjoy it. But yeah, if you enjoy that, you'll probably like this. And in this one there's a lot of themes of Indigenous struggles, of trauma coming in, but there's also a lot of themes of like appreciating nature, of motherhood, of everyday life, and things that I feel like Indigenous culture would celebrate. So it was really interesting to read. I really liked her poems because even though they are short, even though they're not short, even though they are simple and straightforward, you can tell that she's really thought a lot about rhythm and rhyme because her poems flow so well, and I really did enjoy this. And I read The Only White Landscape by Derek Motion, and this poetry collection is again an Aussie poet, and it was really, really hard for me to read because, how do I say this? The way he writes poetry is that he throws a lot of images at you and he doesn't include any line breaks or any reliefs. So basically you have to figure out where the pauses should be, and it's like short little images being thrown at you, and the writing style is kind of static like that because you pause after every word as you don't know when you should naturally pause. And that made it just like I had to use 110% brain power to understand his poems to get to where all these images were supposed to be directing me towards. And once I did get it, I did enjoy it, but it was a lot of work and a bit too much work for me to actually enjoy it. It was a lot about focusing on how the past, the present and the future kind of happen all at once, and that's why all these images are happening, because you can't live in one or the other. We live in all of them at the same time, and it was an experience. I then continued on with Your Scratch and Taraj by Chris Hemsley. So if you can't tell, I do like Cordite Books publishing for Australian poets, and that's why so many of them have the same kind of covers, because I'm reading through their published works. Chris Hemsley is British Australian, and you can definitely see that in his poetry, but it's so hard for me to pin down what his poetry is like, because in every single section he switches up his form, he switches up his style, and he switches up his themes, so none of them are the same. Some of them are more abstract than others. I struggled with the abstract poems. I also struggled with the non-fiction poems, where he was kind of talking about a poet that he really liked, or an experience that he had. I felt like it read more like prose, and it was just a bit too telling rather than showing for me to enjoy it. I struggled with that in fiction, so I definitely struggled with seeing that in poetry. But then he did have some poems that I really, really liked. He had a section which was basically a twist on A Midsummer Night's Dream, and those poems just were such clever twists, and how he used images in those, and the writing was absolutely beautiful. And in some other cases he just had sections which really spoke to me with the images that he used. So I felt like this was like a short story collection where it was a mixed bag, except it was poetry. Continuing on, I read Here Be Dragons by Dennis Green, and I literally picked this one up because the title was Here Be Dragons, and that was all I needed. But Here Be Dragons turned out to be not quite what I expected. He's a very interesting poet because he was, I believe, born in Britain, grew up in Zimbabwe, and now lives in Australia. And his poems really reflect that kind of travelled and international feel, because he writes a lot about explorers and exploring new worlds and colonization and things like that, and you can see that reflected in his poetry. His poems are very structured, so if you feel like you need direction when you're reading your poems, you're definitely going to get that from his work, and I felt like I just enjoyed it overall. There was a poem in here which was based on Ophelia in Hamlet, and I really like that poem. But of course the other ones on explorers and such I really enjoyed too. If you haven't figured it out, this channel is literally just me standing Shakespeare. I haven't been reading the plays lately, so I've been trying to read his material in other forms. And then I read This Is What Gives Us Time by Kevin Brophy, and this was quite a lengthy poetry collection, and it went in quite a few different places, but all of them focused around, I guess, time and what time does to us and experiences that we've had or will have. And quite a lot of them had to do with nature actually, and how nature evolves over time and how we've affected it. I really liked his poems. I feel like his writing was very structured. Sometimes he played with space on the page, which I always enjoy, and he had some really good images that just rolled through the poems. It was really slow and steady, and it just was a deep connection, emotional connection that I felt to his poetry. I find it so hard to review poetry, but yeah, that's what I thought of all the poetry collections I read. And that is all the books that I read in November. Please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comment section down below what book you read in November, what was your favourite, what was your least favourite. Hit the subscribe button if you want to see more, and don't you forget to hit the notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.